We're going to go ahead and get started now. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Jacqueline, and I'm the co-founder of the Young Expressionists. And on behalf of our entire team, I'm super excited to kick off this guest speaker event. Before we get started, I'd like to talk a little bit about our organization, the Young Expressionists, and those of you who aren't familiar with the Young Expressionists is a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing skills and inspiring young students. We host a variety of fun classes along with events and guest speakers like this one. We also have a writing competition going on right now, so if you're interested in entering, all the information can be found on our website at theyoungexpressionists.org. All of the guest speaker information can also be found there as well. And of course, if you know anybody else who would potentially be interested in either the writing competition or these guest speaker webinars, you can definitely share it with them. And one last thing, if you're not on our guest speakers email list and would like to be added, I'll be sending a link in the chat like right after. So be sure to leave behind your email. This email list can also be found on our website. And now I'll hand it to Mila, who will introduce today's speaker.
Yeah, so without further ado, we're pleased to introduce our guest speaker, Joanna Hutchison. So if you don't know who she is, Joanna Hutchison is a professional photographer. She has photographed dance performances, architecture, landscapes, wildlife, travel, family portraits, individual portraits, and weddings. She studied photography at Foothill College and then the New York University, alongside choreography in the Tisch School of the Arts. In this webinar, she will be talking about how you can capture a meaningful image, regardless of what camera you're using. So everybody, oh wait, Jacqueline.
So like all of our guest speaker events, please don't hesitate to ask any questions you have and engage with the presentation. Feel free to unmute or participate if you have any questions, and go ahead and type them into the chat. We'll have time at the end to answer them all.
So everybody, please give Joanna Hutchison a warm welcome, and Joanna, take it away. I think you need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me? Is that okay? Okay. Okay, great. So, excuse me. This is like my, I think only my second time to ever give a talk on photography. So if you have any questions, you know, you can stop me in the middle of the whole thing if you want. All right. So there was actually two videos that I wanted you to share with you before this talk, but Mila didn't get a chance to figure out who was going to attend the talk. So I wanted to have that sent to you after. It'll be on the link somewhere after this chat.
Yeah,
but
I'll put it in the chat after the presentation.
Yeah. So wait, are these two? There's two cats over here. Are they part of the? Do you see it on your screen? No.
I think they're the participants.
Oh, they are. Okay. I just didn't know if they were like actual real people. This is my first time in Zoom. I normally use Google Chat, so it's confused, or Google Meet. Okay. So basically, the two links that you're going to get are a brief history of photography. And here's the sort of like just the timeline of photography. The main thing that's important here is to understand camera, the camera Obscura, when it was invented, which was in 1021. It was around the same time that optics were invented, because the printing press was just invented. Do you guys know about the printing press, where they were creating newspapers and they needed these printing press, right? And so during that time, it was kind of, you know, the same area it was being created. And then for the first time, people found out that they couldn't actually read, you know, because they needed glasses. Because, you know, every day before they would just talk to everyone and, you know, they were interacting and seeing each other, but never in print. So around that time, a lot of people were looking into optics. And so it was around this time that the camera Obscura was also used as one of the experiments about optics. So basically the main thing is the light goes through the camera. There's no lens. It's just a hole in a box. The light goes through the hole, and then on the other side of it, inside of it, is the reflection of the image upside down. And people would put paper in there and they would trace it. And then as it evolved, they would use paper that had chemicals on it, and it would literally record the image of what was outside, upside down. Okay, so as long as you understand that, then you pretty much understand how the camera works. So it kind of works just like the human eye. When we see an image anywhere, like anywhere at all, like you and I are looking at each other, your eye is actually taking in the information upside down, and then your brain in the back of your head here flips it over. It's a very complicated process, but somehow we can do it, instantaneously. Okay, so Mila's going to send you information about that, the history in great detail. Okay, so how many of you guys have heard this this saying, the photographer's eye? Not very much, not at all. You've never heard of it before. Okay, so in the professional world, there's people always say, oh, this person takes really great photos or can take really good photos because they have the photographer's eye. And people would always say, well, what is a photographer's eye, right? And a photographer's eye is basically the idea that you can recognize all of these things underneath it: light, shadow, texture, patterns, shapes, reflections, lines, space. What I mean by space is like two-dimensional space, like in a print, and three-dimensional space, like, what the space that you're standing in. That's a three-dimensional space. Perspective, right? Perspective, different perspective from the top, bottom, middle, corner, angle. Composition, like when you see things that are symmetrical or asymmetrical. Framing, and the fact that you have this obsession of observing. So all of those things come under the photographer's eye, which means that within several seconds, you can look at an image or a plant or a building, and your brain starts to make calculations about all of these things before you actually grab your camera and take a photo. And the combination of those things is what is defined as a photographer's eye. And if you take a lot of photos over time, what ends up happening is you develop your photographer's eye. You start to find that you have a specific style in the way you take photos, and that is very specific to you. So at the very end there, understanding yourself is very related to photographer's eye, because the more you understand yourself and how you take photos also is equivalent to how your photos turn out, right? So the only way to do it is for you to just keep taking photos. So you'll find some people will take photos of events a lot more than they would take photos of, let's say, still life. Still life would be like, things that don't move, like let's say a still life of fruit or like vegetables, or, and you just keep taking photos of it in different angles, right? So in our time now, where there's so much competition for technology and advancement of fancy cameras that cost a lot of money, it's no longer an issue to be able to get access to very, very fancy like cameras. You can literally rent them. You don't even have to buy them. And because of that, the only way for you to actually be competitive is if you develop your photographer's eye. And the photographer's eye is actually something not a lot of people talk about in photography when you study photography, because they obsess about just the cameras and what the cameras can do, and what's the new cool thing it can, what cool lens it has. But if you just go back to the basic and think about when the camera was invented, it was also during the time when people did not really have mirrors, right? So most people didn't see how they looked. So the only way for people to see how they would look is if they were either painted or to see their own reflection in the water, right? And so when cameras were being developed, this is a big deal because people were looking at the same thing, but seeing different things, right? And that's when they realized that everyone has a different perspective. So if you take that understanding, when you take a photo and recognize that the way you see the world is very different from how anybody sees the world, then you can really develop your edge in becoming a great photographer. Okay, so does anyone have any questions about the photographer's eye at this point? Okay, you guys understand what I'm talking about? So it's basically recognizing all of these areas, immediately within seconds. And there's not really a right or wrong way to do it. Some people respond to reflections first. Some people respond to patterns first. But it's this idea that you see the world a specific way and there's an order to it that's very much reflected in yourself and no one else. And you can do it with any camera. You can do it from the cheapest camera you have to a film camera to whatever, to the fanciest camera. You could totally, that's a great thing about developing your photographer's eye, is that it's not really based on money, right? It's based on you developing yourself. Okay, so next scene here, I want to talk about visual light. So visual light is in the family of electromagnetic spectrum. So I'm not a physicist, so that's why I sent the other link that you guys are going to get from Mila. But basically, visual light is one of the items in the electromagnetic spectrum. And it's important to understand that because when we think about light, we think about it as one color, right? Just like this white light right here, it's coming in the triangle. And then when it comes through any object, actually a series of colors come out. So you're not actually seeing one light, but you're seeing a variation of different lights. Does that make sense? So I tried to take a photo of it in my home right here. The sun came out and I took a photo of the white light that you see through the curtains, but then there was a lot of dust in my room. So you could see all the different lights now being reflected on the dust. Okay, and that's something to keep in mind because when you see light in terms of photography, it's very important to understand that you're not seeing one color, you're seeing a variety of different colors being reflected on objects, and that might change the way you photograph things. Okay, it's very complicated, so that the video is going to explain it a lot better. Okay, now we're moving on. So I'm going to now show you different photos that I've taken and basically pointing out all the different things that were on that list on the photographer's eye. Okay, so we're going to go to this first one that I took here. So we moved from California to Scotland. I'm now in Scotland, and this is the first photograph I've taken here. This one is basically this one focuses on reflection and texture. Can you see it? Okay, so yeah, when you get to the point where you're, taking photographs, in the beginning, you just take photographs of your family and friends and, all that stuff on social media and, cute animals, etc. Then once you start to develop yourself, you're going to see a shift in the way you photograph. And that's because in your brain, you're going to start to see the world very differently, right? So I'm obsessed with reflection in this photo and texture. Okay, so basically what I've done is I took a photo of the reflection of the tree, which was upside down. And then during editing, I flipped it over, right? So now it's right side up. So it looks like the tree is growing from the water, but it was also taking the photo of the leftover actual grass that was growing in the water. Right? Do you see now? Like you could do different things. Okay, so again, observing texture and reflection is something to, to look at. Okay, taking photos, going to the next photo, taking photos of universal themes. These are my two kids. And what I mean by universal themes are basically things that everybody can relate to, like family, food, world peace, war. If you take photos of universal themes, usually you get people's attention because it's something that they could relate to. So even though you can't see my two kids' face, you could see that there's a relationship between the two of them, and what they're doing is something that you would see in most kids. It's really common, right? Like two kids are playing, and sometimes the mystery that you don't know who they are actually is more enticing because, you know, you're wondering, there's something to think about. So leave in capturing moments, meaningful photos, leave the audience, the person looking at the photograph, something to work on. You know, you don't always want to take photos where everything is just, you know, all the answers are there. Leave a little bit of mystery. So using universal themes is something I would recommend. Okay. This is a boat, or sorry, a sailboat. I don't own a sailboat. My in-laws have a sailboat, but if you capture something most people don't see, that's also another interesting thing to go into, to look into. How many of you have actually seen the bottom of any boat? Exactly. Yeah. When you see it, you only see this top part, right? And then the sail. And sometimes you actually don't realize how deep the boat goes. Sometimes it's really deep that they even store a lot. So it works as a refrigerator. And in a lot of these places, it's so small inside. So anyway, capturing items or things that most people don't see can be quite revealing in a photograph because, you know, it's not common, right? So try to take photos that are not common. Okay, here, the play in light and shadows, foreground, middle ground, background, and groupings of subject matter. These are called Heelan Coos. And it translates to, Heelan Coos is the Gaelic translation for Highland cows. And I don't know if you noticed, but look at their hair. It's like red and it's always on their face. And they have these like huge like hooves right on the top of their heads. So this is a play on composition. There's like basically the foreground, the background, and the cows themselves decided to group themselves in this way. It's not like I went there and moved the cows, you know, like they decided to have all the orange in one area and all the darker ones on the other area. So again, looking at, when you photograph, looking at the space. So this would be considered, even though it's two-dimensional, it can be considered slightly three-dimensional because you can see yourself walking into it, right? In this particular photo, could you see yourself kind of walking into the space? Yeah, okay. So that's what I'm talking about. Like, even though it's in a two-dimensional piece of paper, right, because it's a photograph, you're inviting your audience to walk into the space with you. At least that's what I was trying to do. Okay, next slide. Does anyone have any questions? By the way, you can just interrupt me whenever. Okay. Next question is basically capturing romanticized scenes in movies. So this would be like the your typical English pastoral or Scottish pastoral. Well, basically it's right near a river and there's usually sheep. There's always sheep because the sheep have to eat all day long. And actually all night long, all they do is chew grass. It's like an amazing life. It's like all they do is chew grass. It's like, here we are trying to figure out what to do with our lives, and all they do is chew grass all day long. And so if you capture, again, going back to traditional romanticized themes, usually that gets people's attention to you, like, you know, because there's something about it that is, at least for people that are from Western society, like that gravitates their attention to these scenes, because they're really quite peaceful. That's probably one of the reasons. Okay, the next slide here is, well, why don't you tell me, what do you guys notice in this particular, you know, slide, this particular photo?
The reflection of a tree on the water.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Do you see anything else? Well, it may take some time to see these things. So initially, when you look at it, you see the reflection of the tree, right? But you can also see lots of lines. Can you see the lines? They're this way, and then there's the tree trunks that are going up and down this way. And then there's the branches, right? And then we talked about composition, which is basically where you want your audience. What are you trying to do with your audience? Because keep in mind, when you take a photo, there's someone that's going to look at your photo. So what do you want them to see? So every time you look through your little, your camera or your camera hole, you basically are trying to figure out, okay, I want to tell a story. What do I want to say? So in this case, again, I want my audience to go into this scene and come in. And the reason why that is because I literally put the most interesting part, at the very, very back, right? The actual scene is actually at the very, very back. So the audience with their eyes are going in to kind of like, move all the way to the back to be able to figure out what's all the way back there in that space, in the space.
Someone said that they see colored versus black and white. So I think that they mean like the bottom is kind of black and white and the top is kind of more colorful.
Exactly, yeah. So contrast, right? The contrast of color and black and white. So why do most people even shoot in black and white? Why do you think they shoot in black and white if there's already colored film? I mean, there could be a million reasons, but why do you think they do?
To take attention away from the color.
That's right. When you take the color away, what's left? What do you think is left?
Just like the details of the actual landscape or what you're taking a picture of.
Exactly. And in humans, what's left will be the full emotion. So every time you take people in black and white and make it black and white, now you're not distracted by the colors. What your eyes focus on is the actual emotions of the people, right? Try it out. Do black and white photos of your family members laughing, crying, whatever they're doing, like their emotional state, and it is more amplified in black and white. Right. So this one actually is exactly, it's not perfect, but the reflection is not 100% black and white, but you could see the contrast between the two. Right. So just like anything else, if you have contrast in your work, it adds flavor to it. Just think of photography as a form of cooking, because I love cooking. That's why I can use that as a metaphor. You don't want a bland like oatmeal, right? Like you don't want to just put in there oats and water. You want it to have like texture. So you can put some nuts in there, some seeds. You can put some flavor and put like honey, right? It's layering, lots of different layerings. And it just depends on what you want to do. Look at this next image. What does this image remind you of? Or there's really no right and wrong answer. What does it remind you of?
I'd say maybe like traveling.
Huh?
Traveling or like going somewhere.
Traveling. Okay, traveling.
Someone said a human face.
Oh, really? A human face? Where's the eyes?
I'm not sure. I think it'd be the sun.
The clouds maybe.
The shiny top.
Uh-huh. So this particular photo, we were traveling and we were in a train. And this is literally the shot through the window of the train. And the window is dirty, right? But actually what ends up happening is when you shoot things like this, it is a reminder of certain certain times. Like if you go back in history, when they used to shoot, places, they could never get a clean slate. You know what I mean? It was always a little bit, the way it would be developed is kind of a messy process. So it would always come out like this. You know how it wouldn't be like super clean and perfect and just like the previous photo like this. You see how this is super clean and, you know, technically perfect and so forth. A long time ago in the 1800s, every time they would shoot, it would take, you know, first of all, it would take forever because it once you hit the, you know, the button on your camera, it takes a few seconds. It's not like, actually not seconds, minutes. So sometimes it's blurry. Anyway, long story short, when you take black and white photos through a film that's not clear, what it does is it makes it look like it's an old photograph. So this is kind of a play on, you know, Cornwall is where this place was, and all of the sailboats in there, right? And if you take it and then turn your photograph in black and white and kind of give it a filter, like you can even do it with either a window or like maybe your sunglasses or another glass. If you put it through your, you know, camera, in front of your camera, then you give it now texture. Right? So now it looks like an old photograph from the past, but you took it in the present. You see how there's like, it makes your images a little bit more interesting. So I put in here creating timeless photograph by visiting the past in the present time. So if you take photos in the present time, but make it look like it's from the past, then you're kind of merging the present and the past together. And those images are interesting in itself. Okay, so next photograph is this one called the shot tower. Does anyone know what a shot tower is? Okay, so I didn't know myself until after I photographed this this building. It was really funny. So I was invited to Australia and I felt really sick because I think it was summer in California and winter over there, and it like our bodies, or my body, does not do well with like that sharp or stark, you know, switch. So I spent most of the time actually sick in Australia. But then my cousin said to me, just come out one time and take some good photos. You brought your camera. And then so I said, okay, fine. So I take this picture of this building. It's called the Shot Tower. And a long time ago, when they were still making bullets, I mean, they make bullets now too, but a long time ago, it was literally lead, liquid lead that goes at the very top here. And then it was dropped all the way down very quickly. And by the time it reached all the way down, it's a huge building. It was a bullet, right? And that's all these buildings were made where they would make these bullets. Well, in Australia, they have this rule that you're not allowed to destroy historic buildings. So basically, what the city did was build this thing around it, if you see it right here, and they made it into a mall. The whole thing is inside this big thing, and it's inside a mall. So inside there are now, you know, like clothing, like jewelry, clothing, whatever you guys normally buy in malls, right? And so anyway, this print is really, really special because I put it up in a gallery just as an experiment to see if anyone would buy this print. And it was actually just for fun. It was priced for $5,365. And I was thinking to myself, nobody would buy it. I just wanted to see, because some old woman in the gallery said, oh, Joanna, you should go and put up a really big, you know, print, right? And so I said, oh, actually I have a good one. And so I put it in the gallery. A week later, I get a phone call, and this guy, the same old woman, the receptionist, was saying, oh, somebody has been looking at your, you know, work, the Shot Tower. And basically it never made it to the wall in the gallery. They just bought it from the cubby. They gave us cubbies. So what I'm trying to say is, take a lot of photos. It will change your life. You never know who's going to buy it. And what you think is beautiful or not beautiful may sell or may not sell. It's not really up to you. It's whoever wants to buy it, right? Well, it turns out the guy was collecting a bunch of photos of shot towers all over the world. So it was just a weird coincidence. Okay, so I put in here capturing images that awaken the human curiosity, because when you first look at this image, what actually did you think it was? Does it, does anything at all come into your mind?
A satellite?
A satellite. Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought too, but it's not. But that's what I would think, what people would think about. Okay, next slideshow is capturing the full cycle of seasons, right? So here in the Scottish Highlands, it gets very, very cold, and it could be so beautiful, even though it's so uncomfortable. This is the scenes you see during the winter here. I mean, just like amazing, like things, you know, trees that are filled with snowflakes, or just snow, covered with snow, like something that we would like spray, you know, like pretend snow in San Jose, right? And here you actually see it in real life, and it's so amazing to see transforming. So in your taking photos, again, in taking meaningful photos, if you catch the season in the beginning of each season, right? That really is something that a lot of people can relate to, again, because even people that live in California, they know that there are 4 seasons, right? They usually travel to other places to see the 4 seasons happening. So capture those times, and yeah, it should capture a lot of attention.
You have a question on this. It said,
Yeah.
why did you choose to portray this in black and white?
Oh, just to show the contrast, because the snow was so white, right? And then, and if you put it in black and white, you could really, really see how white it is. If you left it in color, you could branches brown and some of the greens on the tree. So when you do things in black and white, it really oversimplifies the image itself, right? And so it kind of gives it a different mood as well. So that's the other thing you want to ask yourself, is like, what kind of mood do you want to portray in these photographs? Again, you know, when you're photographing images, I mean, I don't know how it is now for your generation, because everything, you know, is like instant gratification, right? You're just like hitting that, you know, the button in your phone constantly, right? But the old-fashioned photographers, they had to stop and think about every photo, because they were working on film. And every strip was like 25 or 36, 24, 36, I believe. And, you know, it's very expensive to buy a film. Then after that film, you'd have to go to your darkroom and develop every single one of those things. So you can't be just like reckless and taking random shots. You literally have to stop and think about what you want to do. And so that if there was 36 in a roll, every one of those 36 photos would look amazing, because you thought about the light, the composition, the subject matter, etc. Being not amazing, but you know what I mean? Like you gave it some thought. Of course, like photographers make mistakes all the time. And that's how we all learn, by making a lot of mistakes, choosing the wrong cameras, right? Every time you make a mistake, you learn. So you try different things. But like I said, you start to, when you're taking photos, it may be quiet around you and your fingers are going, but in your mind, it's actually quite loud. There's a lot of things you're thinking about. And the quieter it gets, the easier it is to hear yourself actually have, you know, your own voice, have a conversation with what it is that you want to portray in the image. Okay, this one is about using perspective. I think a lot of the time what we tend to do, especially if you know your young people watch a lot of TV or on social media, like it's hard for you to actually create something that somebody has not seen yet. Primarily because you're constantly looking at so many image, like thousands of image daily, right? Without you even trying, like you just scroll through your friend stuff, your you know, what you watch on TV, what you, right? Everywhere around you. But if you really want to develop your photographer's eye, I encourage, just go ahead and get rid of that. Like turn off social media for 1 week. don't watch any TV, and see what happens to your brain and what happens to the images that you take. Because you're going to start to see a lot of changes in the way you see the world, and you're going to notice things that you didn't notice before, right? So again, let's go back to that whole idea of when the world was the way it was without mirrors, right? Like you didn't know how you look like, and the only way other people could tell how they look like was if you captured them. How would that world look like for you? Okay, so I don't know why I put understanding light right here. Okay, yeah, understanding light. So the next series of photos would be about understanding light. Okay, so photography means light drawing. So you're taking your understanding of light and you are exploiting it, like you are taking it to different levels so that you can literally capture the moment in time and record it in a photograph. And so the only way for you to understand light is, first of all, watch that video that Mila's going to send you. and then go ahead and in your home, in your natural environment, observe all the types of different light you have, whether it be natural or artificial. Like, for example, you know, this light right here. Can you see it above me here? The chandelier up there. You can't really see it. It's too bright. Okay, but there you can also play with candlelight. You can play with your, you know, flashlights, right? You can go outside before the sun comes up and basically take photos under that light. You can go when the sun is coming out. You can take photos and look at the photos you can take in that light. You can take photos in the afternoon and in the evening, right? And see how light plays in your in the photographs that you take, because the light will give you mood. Do you know what I mean by that? Mood. So if it's very, very bright, then you get like kind of like a clinical, like it's, you know, actually up here, they call it intrusive light. They don't like these big, large lights that we have back home in California. They like these, like, you know, kind of like this type of light. Let me show it to you in my room over here. It's, well, I don't know if you get to really see it. Let's see. These like reading lights. You see it? Do you see this? Yeah, okay. These types of lights, because it's very specific to that space. And it, let me turn off the other lights. And it provides mood. Do you see the difference? Immediately there's like mood, right? So you've got a big light, then suddenly the big light exposes everything, and you know your mood is out the door, right? It's like this. And you know, if you ever want to, photography is sort of like the basis for filmmaking, you know, because you start out with basically capturing, you know, scenes maybe, right? And like you could look at a movie, turn off the volume, there's no talking, and just look at it as a series of photographic slides. And really what it is you're just capturing different scenes. Okay, this scene is for two people are about to fight. What kind of lighting do you want? Two people are about to have, you know, give each other a hug. What kind of, you know, mood do you want to portray? So that's why it's really important to see the different types of lights. And you can also experiment on filters, different types of filters that give color, right? So again, just ask yourself, how does it affect your emotions when light is sunny, overcast, foggy, dark, without light? You know, use light as the palette to create a variety of moods in your photography. And again, you can do all this, just slow everything down and don't expose yourself to so much images a day, because inside your brain is actually more interesting than what is outside of yourself, believe it or not. But you have to give it some space to come out, and you can't let it come out if you are constantly on these devices, right? So just if you want to actually explore with these things, go about it the old-fashioned way and slow everything down and eliminate the amount of images that you're constantly seeing on a daily basis that you can control. Of course, you can't control like what's around you, but that you can control. And then when you start to think about light, mood, composition, it's all going to come out. So here are examples of a play in light. Okay, so here's the first one. And again, I put them in black and white to just show the contrast, but this day was so cold that the whole lake froze, right? That we were feeding ducks in this lake, and then suddenly the next scene was the ducks were walking on the lake. It was like, oh my God, what are they gonna do next? So I guess they flew. They're like, see you later. We'll be back next season. So we brought all this bread, they ate it, and they're like, later. So, but, again, if you wanted to create, like, this could be a beginning of a film, right? Like, or a beginning of a great story if you're a writer. Sometimes all these artists usually feed off of each other, right? A writer could see an image and start writing immediately about characters, a murder scene, whatever, right? And, a film person could, like, immediately see this scene in one of their films, like somewhere in between, like, a traveling scene or whatever. So artists usually, like, they take each other's work and they're usually inspired by it, which is kind of cool. Okay, here's another day, another cold day. I'm taking all these cold photos because it's cold here right now. I mean, there's really not much, there's no way around it unless you take like indoor photography. So this is a photograph when the sun is actually just going down, but it looks like it's about to go up, right? So it's kind of this in-between thing where you're like, is it going up or is it going down? But it's actually going down. So, okay, so again, in this particular scene, let's just look at all the things you could see here. You could see composition, right? You're entering inside the photograph in an angle with your eyes. I don't mean you physically, but literally your eyes are entering from the angle. You could see the texture. Do you see anything else? You have the color, right? What kind of mood does it give you in terms of feeling? I mean, any feeling. It's like,
I'm kind of getting like a realization, like a refreshing, like
a refreshing feeling. Okay, yeah. Well, it's ironic enough, that's exactly how it felt like being out there. The air was so amazing. So, exactly. So, you want to evoke the emotions of the individuals who are looking at your photograph, right? You want to, like, just kind of like, again, the cooking thing. You have a palate for culinary people. It's the human tongue and the senses, right? They're smelling the food, they're seeing the food, they're tasting the food, they're touching the food. With photography, it's a visual thing, but you want to figure out a way to capture something that entices the senses just by evoking it through the eyes.
Yeah, someone said that it feels calm, like here, I'll read it. Calm, like you can feel the cold air, but also just the silver of the warm sun is what they said.
Great. That's fantastic, right? I mean, the fact that, you're looking at a photograph, it can make you have a reaction to it is great. What's not good is if you look at a photograph and you don't have a reaction to it. Either like your senses are not working or the photograph did not do its job. Okay, what about
another person said that it says that it portrays life is coming back, is what they said.
Yes. This and that was actually intentional for me, because it can feel like here that, during the winter that it's all dead, because the trees, I mean, unless they're pines, they're mainly empty with leaves. So it can have that kind of like, and especially if you watch like, scary movies or whatever, they always have these scenes where it's like all the trees are empty and the snow's on it, it's like overcast, and right, you could hear it, you could hear the music, right, and then when you see the sun come up, it's so beautiful because you hardly see it. I mean, the sunlight's so usually overcast here all the time, so it's quite dramatic when you see the light and you feel like, my God, there's hope, so That's good. Good job on that one. Okay, so next one right here. This one is, again, we're still in the subject of light, right? The play in light. So what do you find interesting, or what kind of mood, or, you know, do you feel looking at this image?
I'd say it's mysterious and somewhat gloomy.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So in this particular photograph, this was my in-laws. They invited us. They were sailing, and the sun is setting. And are you aware of impressionistic paintings? Okay. So impressionistic paintings is when, again, it was way before. I'm not sure if it was before the time of the mirrors, or I think it was already after the time of the mirrors, but basically the impressionistic painters were concerned about how the light is portrayed in any object. They were not concerned about the object itself. So when they would paint, they painted the light on the object. So as you know, notice they were not, none of these images are very sharp. Like you can almost not, they almost look like they're not real, right? The sailboats. Do they not? They seem like they're kind of like little toys that I put in a, like, let's say in a piece of paper, or I don't know, water, and just made the scene myself, right? But basically this was influenced by the idea of impressionistic paintings, and you can look it up yourself. Impressionistic painters were like Van Gogh, and usually a lot of their paintings are a little bit chaotic, because what they're doing is they're trying to portray the light hitting the image instead of just the image itself. Yeah, it is gloomy. It's a little bit gloomy. So it's, it's overcast. So there's always, it's inviting for a story to be told.
Yeah, it looks like the calm before a storm. And then some people said that it feels haunting and kind of eerie as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly, I mean, you want it to be a conversation starter, and like I said, it's kind of like when you have any kind of paint, or I don't know what you guys use now for digital art, but playing with colors can make your images really, really down and depressing, or really, really happy, right? You could like literally just, it's like the spectrum of emotions. And what you want to do is, again, in taking meaningful photos, go ahead and capture all of those emotions, which, by the way, the human emotion is, there's a lot. I mean, it's not just happy, sad, or, excited. It's not just the whatever 11 or 7 universal ones. There's a lot of in between ones that you can capture. Okay, here's another plain light. Right, just the simple play of candles. And by the way, there really was a time where the only light available indoors were candles. And in the Netherlands, I believe, yeah, they have a saying called hygge, and spelled Hygge. And it is literally this idea, one of the elements of hygge is to just turn off the lights and use candles everywhere. And it brings you to a really calm mood, and primarily because the limbic part of your brain, the lizard part of your brain, remembers that for thousands of years, this was the light that humans used. This is it, and you had to write with this type of light. And you also had, you were aware of time because it was melting, right? So you didn't just have endless amount of light. You had to get your act together and write whatever it is you wanted to write, or do whatever it is you want to do, make your bread, because you don't have another candle, So
Wait, just a reminder, we only have 10 minutes left.
Okay. Yeah, so let me just go through it really quick right here, then so you guys can ask questions. So capturing, these are like photos from when I was actually, getting paid to do family portraits. For family portraits, don't try to capture them perfectly. Just go ahead and look at the families and see how chaotic they are, and go ahead and take the shot. And actually you may come out with great photos. Here's one on, capturing chaos right here. The human eye likes patterns, repeated patterns. This is Mila when she was, I think, 2. I told her I'd put her that one because she had such a great expression on her face. Okay, framing your work so that, you're doing something different, like using her dress as a background. Okay, taking photographs of people that mostly never get photographed, like the engineers of a steam train. Nobody ever cares about them and they run the train. Taking photographs in sepia mode, which makes it seem like it's, in the past. Okay, one last thing, I just want to go over rhythm, timing, and flow. In capturing motion, it's important to understand timing and flow. So I'm just going to give you a series of them. So here's 1, 2, and 3. Oh, another one right here. So you feel like you can feel them swinging left and then right. Okay, so then there's understanding your camera. The most important part here is to understand that inside your camera is an actual, oh goodness, I don't know what to call them. It's like a plate. The bigger the plate, the more expensive the camera. And this is what allows the light, once it comes in, the bigger ones are, more sensitive. Right? So it will give you sharper photos, but you don't need to have sharper photos if you don't need sharper photos. It's only if you need it. So for the 1 inch, for the point and shoot, it's usually 1 inch. These are all the different, what you will see in a 135 millimeter lens. 185, 50, and 35 are usually the ones that you basically use. This is what you see. And you guys can have the slide, so, this is very important, understanding your camera. The smaller the number, the bigger the hole in your camera. These are the aperture shots. So your images become very sharp in the front, but then they're blurred in the back. If you want the full image, then you want a higher aperture right here, f22, and then the hole in the middle of your camera will get smaller and then everything will be sharp. Okay? So, and then I just gave like really easy, cartoon looking, this is what's inside your camera, like inside here is what's opening. F1, 2, 3, 4. In your phone camera, so you don't even have to worry about that. I'm just talking about regular professional cameras. Okay, so if you want to understand shutter speed, right? That's basically the part in your camera that says shutter speed. You'll know where it is on your camera. It'll tell you on the manual. But the faster, if you're trying to record someone running really fast and you want to go over 500, if you want to record them doing like a slow-mo where they have like, the shadow of themselves, then you want to record it less than a second. Okay, so you've got f-stop, shutter speed, ISO equals exposure. Exposure is another word for the amount of light you get per your camera. You guys can ask me more questions about it. I know we're going through it very fast. So here's an example of overexposed, a photograph, and underexposed. Overexposed, as you can see up here, the clouds are super bright, right? Like, I've lowered down the light on my screen, but it's super bright. So you don't want shots like that because it's kind of harsh to the eye unless you did it purposefully. And underexposed is when there's not enough light, and you can see it over here. It's like it's too dark, right? So the formula over here, I gave it to you, which is that if you want someone running really fast, right, then you need to have your ISO in 50, your shutter speed in 1,000, your f-stop in 32. And they go like this. So depending on how you want your character to look like or your image to look like, then you're gonna have to follow, the f-stops, the ISOs, and the shutter speed. All of this will be in your camera manual. So basically, if you want to get technical about it, but I want you to know that you don't need to know all this stuff to be able to take a great photo. That's just like if you want to really, really manipulate your camera. In the beginning, I would definitely just develop the photographer's eye. Okay, so I'm just gonna open it now for questions. Sorry.
All right. So during your presentation, we're getting some questions in the chat, so I guess I'll just go over a few of them.
Okay.
Do you have like a portfolio that with like your own pictures? Because
This,
most photographers do.
yeah, this was it.
Okay.
Yeah, these are all of them actually were all my photos. We
Okay.
didn't get a chance to talk about this one, but yeah.
And I'll include the slides in the email for everybody to reference.
Yeah.
What kind of camera do you use?
Okay, I use a variety of cameras. So when I basically take a wedding, I basically want to use a DSL camera. I just go with Canon, like a Canon camera. And for when I'm traveling, I just use a small point and shoot camera. This one is a Leica. It's kind of a pricey camera, but I waited till it was on sale. It's very small, right? But basically, the thing about cameras is, I think if you want to pick a camera, don't pick what other photographers use. Go into the camera shop and literally hold it up with your hands and pick the one that fits well with your lifestyle. Like if it's light, does it fit your hand correctly? Can you afford it? Do you want to rent it? Do you want to, right? Don't focus so much on like, oh, that guy shoots with this camera, I need to shoot with this camera, because it's how you feel with it. It's kind of like, think of cameras are like shoes. If you're wearing uncomfortable shoes, it won't matter who it's by. It's going to make you miserable. You need to pick the camera that works with you and your fingers and the weight of the camera. The weight, especially because cameras can weigh a lot. The sensors in the back, remember I was showing you the larger the sensor, the better it is, right? And usually the camera is more expensive, but it's also true that the camera is quite heavy. So the weight is an important factor to consider, because when you're taking a photograph of, let's say, a wedding for 8 hours, nonstop, it's not fun to be carrying a really heavy camera that you can't handle. Do you know what I mean? Okay.
Yeah, we have another question. So what got you into photography? Like what made you want to get into it?
Okay, so I actually went to school for choreography and I minored in photography. So I think what really interested me in photography was I had a friend named Doug who basically needed some models. And when I was going to Foothill College, he just called a bunch of dancers from the dance department. And he's like, oh, I need a few models. And so we modeled for him. And then, but I was one of the only ones that was so interested in the process of photography because he was kind of, well, photographers are really interesting people because they don't think and they don't see the world in the same way as most people. And it's because of all that stuff we talked about earlier, which is that they start to think a lot about all this stuff right here. Light, shadows, texture, patterns, shapes, reflection, lines, constantly. It's like a constant ongoing thing. So when they see a movie, they're talking about these things. When they read a book, they're talking about all of these things. When they see a painting, right? So it's like, I think I became so obsessed with that because I also went to school for choreography. Even though I was trained as a dance performer, I really loved the lifestyle of the people that created the dance more than performing them. So I think that was the beginning of it. And then it wasn't until I had to photograph my friend's wedding, in which I actually made a mistake and all of the photos were orange, right? I did something wrong with exposure, whatever. All of them were, I mean, they were great photos. The composition was great. The people were great. And they all turned out orange. It was terrible. Well, it turns out if you take any photographs as orange and turn it into black and white, it's amazing. So then I gave it to her as black and white. And basically she said, oh my God, Joe, they want to buy photos. And, during that time, I'm not selling photos. I just took the photo for her for fun because she wanted to have she didn't want to pay a photographer. So we had to print them out from Costco. It's ridiculous, but it was so old school. I'm like, I took the photo, turned in the film, and then we had to print it out, you know, depending on what people wanted to buy from Costco. So yeah, that's how it started out.
All right, and then I think we'll just have one more question and then we'll wrap this up. You mentioned taking pictures of ordinary things. So how do you take a picture of something ordinary and still make it look interesting?
Well, so that's actually what I'm trying to communicate with you, is that ordinary things are ordinary, but the more you develop your own sort of style in taking photos, and I found this literally when I was taking a digital photography class in Santa Clara adult education, when I was living in Santa Clara, that our professor would basically ask us, you know, go ahead and take a photo of this apple, right? And she'd put like a piece of apple right there on the table. And all of us would go around and take photos of this apple from different angles. You know, it's just so simple. Then she would take our photographs, right? We give it to her digital form. Then she would print all of them at Costco and she would put it in a black board without our names were behind it, but you know, we couldn't see it. And every single person in the class knew which one is a good photo. It was like the best photo of that apple, right? And we didn't know ourselves if we took those photos or not. So eventually she would reveal who took the good photo, and then that person would say what they did. The point of it is that there is such a thing as universal beauty, meaning that even though we take different photographs, you can literally capture something that people are attracted to universally, right? And you can only develop it in that level if you keep taking the photos. So I don't know how to make things, you know, extraordinary that are ordinary. It's just literally by taking photos of it. And most of the time, it's usually applying these elements, something that you saw that most people didn't see, whether it be a reflection of the apple or you took an angle of the apple that is not common, right? So, but what I'm saying is, believe it or not, it's actually more work than you think. The thinking part, the taking the photo is easy. You just press the button, right? And like I said, most people right now are so focused on the purchasing of a fancy camera. Don't go that way. Focus on going through this, you know, understanding light, shadow, go and every single one of this and literally look it up and understand what it means and play with it. And I guarantee you within a few months of taking photos after photos, you're going to start to take really interesting pictures that you never thought you could take yourself. Okay, well, is that good?
Yeah, I think we'll probably wrap it up now. So this webinar was recorded and we'll be posting it on our YouTube channel soon, and we'll definitely send out an email to everyone on our mailing list. You subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out the email if you want to get updates about these webinars. All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah. And oh, where should I send the Mila? You have it already, so you can just send it to them. The link for Light and History.
Yeah, I'm gonna send it in the chat right now. I sent it before, but I'm gonna send it again. Yeah.
Okay. I hope what I gave was helpful to everyone.
Yeah, it definitely was. I know I learned a lot. So thank you for coming, guys. And thank you.
You're welcome.